Welcome, or welcome back if you're cool. So this may or may not come as a surprise, but I pretty much exclusively read fantasy with a little bit of sci-fi sprinkled in for spice. But today I'm going to give the people what they want, and I'm going to explore the world of other genres. And by the people, I mean there's like 2 people who want me to read other books, and one of them is my grandmother. Although this will probably also help keep the blank stares at bay when I describe to people what kind of books I read. The problem is I am not a patient person, and when I don't like something, I pretty much know right away, and I'm not going to finish it. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to give each of the major genres one chance to catch my attention. I'm going to pick one book from each of the major genres, and I'm going to, based on that book, I'm going to decide whether or not I like the genre, whether or not I'm going to keep reading more books from that genre, etc. So pretty simple. I'm just going to go to the library, I'm going to pick out 6 books, one from each of these genres, and then we will go from there. Alright, I have come back from the library with my pick. So I am beginning to realize that this is going to be a lot of reading. Just looking at this, and I don't want to spend a ton of time reading books that I don't necessarily like, and I also don't want to force myself to finish a book that I'm not enjoying, because that just kind of kills your reading momentum. So I've decided what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the first 100 pages of each of these books, and then based on those 100 pages I'm going to decide whether or not I like the genre, and whether or not I'm going to continue reading the book. So that should probably be enough to get a feel for the genre, and make up my mind forever about whether or not I like it. Let's get started. Alright, I have finished all of my reading, and I have some thoughts. So first up we have Mystery, The Murder of Rodger Ackroyd. And honestly, I don't know why I didn't read Mystery a long time ago. I love mystery in other books that I read, so I don't know why I didn't make the connection that this was a good genre for me, but I loved this book. It was not really what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be a lot more flowery because it is a classic author, but it was a very easy read and a really good book, at least the first 100 pages are. So I do plan on finishing this book, and I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I do plan on reading more in the mystery genre. Specifically, I plan on reading more Agatha Christie. I've actually already gone back to the library and gotten another one of her books to read, so that's how much I liked this. Okay, this book, I am furious, because on page 3 of this book, it gives away the ending of The Murder of Rodger Ackroyd. I don't know what the odds of that happening are, but I'm very upset because I was gonna finish that book, and now I don't even know if there's a point. I already know who the murderer is. So I'm kind of disappointed about that. And right off the bat, that was not a good start for this book. But aside from that, I did like this book. It's about this guy who can see ghosts, and they communicate to him what is keeping them on Earth, and preventing them from passing on to the afterlife. And then he helps them finish what they need to on Earth. I don't think this was actually the best pick for the horror genre, because it seemed more of a thriller to me. It wasn't really the spooky, scary horror story that I was looking for, but there were a lot of fantasy elements, which did mean that I liked this book a lot, and I am going to give this book a 3 out of 5 stars. I would have given it a 4 out of 5 stars, but I'm still angry at the author for giving away the plot of the Agatha Christie book I read. So this one's getting a 3 out of 5 stars. I do think I'm going to finish this one. I'm interested to see the ending, because there's some mystery elements. It really pulled me in, and I do think I'm going to read more horror. I would like to see a better representation of the genre. I just have this... I get scared pretty easily, but I want to see if I can handle it, and I want to be frightened. Alright, the next book I read was The Yellow House, which was the historical fiction book, and this is one I was really dreading because I just am not interested in historical fiction, and I did not think I would enjoy this book. And actually, about 25 pages in, I was very close to just quitting because I could just not get into it. It had a pretty slow beginning, but I did stick with it, and probably about 50 pages in, I was hooked. It's about this girl who's growing up in Ireland in the early 1900s, so there's conflict between Protestants and Catholics, and she has a lot of family trauma very early on, and she essentially ends up losing her family and having to grow up alone in this period of industrialization. So it's been a pretty sad story so far. I did cry at one point, but it really got me invested in this main character. She has a lot of personality and a lot of flaws, and clearly has a lot of trauma, and it was just very enjoyable read so far. So I do think I'm going to finish this book. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 stars, and although I don't think I will really be reading much more historical fiction in the future, this has led me to realize that I can enjoy historical fiction. I just have to give it a little more of a chance and be a little more patient with it. So maybe I will read a little bit more in the future, but I do not see this becoming a genre that I pick up a lot. Right, on to romance. Of course, I had to pick a Nicholas Sparks book, but this was another genre that I was not super looking forward to. I did not really think I was going to enjoy it, and it was okay. This one's set in the 60s in a small town. It's very Christian. It was kind of honestly exactly what I expected, but in the first 100 pages, there's really not too much romance, so maybe I didn't get a great idea of the genre, but this is not something that I really got into. I do think I might finish reading it just because there's only 100 pages left, and I do kind of want to see where it's going a little bit. So yeah, I think I will finish this one. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 stars, and I do not think I will be reading any more romance. Alright, the next book I read was the action-adventure book, and I actually had some high hopes for this genre just because most of what I read is action-adventure just in a fantasy setting, so I thought, hey, this will be a genre that I will enjoy, but I really just found myself missing something. I realized that a lot of what I enjoy about fantasy is the settings and the characters, and this book didn't really have a lot of didn't really develop on these a lot. So this book is set in DC, so that was kind of cool because I am from around that area, but otherwise it really didn't interest me too much. And the prose, I could tell that this was a newer author because the prose were a bit lackluster, just was not super well written, and it really had a huge emphasis on plot over really anything else. So I'm going to give this book a 1 out of 5 stars. I do not think I will be finishing this one, and I don't think I'll be picking up any more action-adventure that's exclusively marketed as action-adventure. And then my final book was the literary fiction, and I don't have a ton to say about this one, honestly. It's about a woman who's lost her son and is basically grieving, and then it's also paired with another story about another woman who's very overprotective of her son, and it's not clear what the relationship is at this point in the book that I got to, so I am a little interested to know what that connection's going to be, but beyond that, I just couldn't really find myself getting into it. It's just, I don't think it was for me. Their problems, this is bad to say, but I just didn't really care that much, and maybe it'll get better, but I don't think I'm going to continue reading to find out. So I'm gonna give this book a 2 out of 5 stars. The prose was very enjoyable, but the story was not that interesting in my opinion, and I don't know if I'll read any more literary fiction. Maybe if I get a specific book recommended to me, I will, but I don't think I'll be seeking it out. So there are my thoughts on other genres. I found a couple of genres that I'm a bit interested in, but honestly, I'm just happy to get back to sci-fi fantasy and get lost in some made-up worlds and fake technology. I think I did learn through this process that genres are a bit arbitrary because there's a lot of cross between genres. There were some fantasy elements in some of the books I read. There were romance elements in books that weren't romance. There were historical elements in books that weren't the historical fiction. So, you know, I think what I've learned is just read what sounds interesting, regardless of genre. But you know what? If people tell you that the genre you read is not good enough or isn't real literature, I say, do what makes you happy. That's what I'm going to do. So thanks for watching. This has been a fun little experiment, and I hope you enjoyed.